Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. Hello and welcome to my channel. So this is going to be the predictions for 2025 series. I know that I should have started a while ago, and for a bit I was kind of hovering back and forth between should I still do this series, Should I not do it? Those of you who have been watching my channel for a few years, you probably remember that I have done these predictions for, the year in question, like yearly predictions, a way back. I think I started with 2021, maybe. And I don't remember exactly if I did them until 2023 but I stopped, definitely didn't do them for 2024 because I did say at that time also I was running late and I didn't really have the time or energy to focus on them, and they are quite time consuming. But this time I said, you know what, F it. I feel like it's time to do the prediction series, and I did do a poll in my community page some weeks ago. I think it was more than a month ago, to be fair, and I asked how many of you would like to see your predictions for 2025, and pretty much an overwhelming majority said that they would be interested in seeing it. So I figured, hey, I'm not that late because 2025 still has at least another 11 months to go, so I figured better late than never. So here it is. I'm going to start with the predictions. As an introduction, I do want to say, again, mostly for those of you who have watched these prediction videos in previous years, you probably remember that generally I like to divide the year into subsections. This year was really complicated to do, so I'm not going to be able to do a chart for each subsection, because if I had to do that based on the planets that I normally look at for general predictions, which are Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, and Jupiter, I would have had to divide the year into like 5 different charts and, compute 5 different charts and arrange them and all that. So I chose to divide the year in just 3 different charts, and then 2 of those 3 charts have subdivisions. But you're going to see what I'm talking about in a more visual way when I get to each subdivision. You will see a chart with the general transits and more details on them. I do want to start talking about, I want to mention, okay, I'm not going to hold a long speech, but I want to mention again, just as in previous years, I have decided to focus on, like I said, Saturn and Rahu, Ketu, and then Jupiter, because these are the more slow-moving planets, so they spend a longer time in one sign. So obviously, it doesn't mean that these are the only transits you're going to be going through in 2025, because all the planets are transiting, right? As you probably know, the sun is going to be spending about 30 days in one sign. That's why everyone knows that they're born in Aries or Gemini or whatever, or, what all of the people who know their zodiac signs know, which is that the sun changes every month, like every roughly 30 days or so. And in addition to the sun, of course, there's the other planets. So each of them are going to be transiting through a sign. But because these are general readings, and of course it would be impossible to look at everything, because even with these readings, you're going to see, I think they're pretty detailed. I'm going to go pretty much in detail with a lot of things. But it would have been even more impossible to take into account all the transits. And then, of course, speaking of the subject of predictions, you also have to look at the dashas and the mahadashas and the antardashas and all the different types of dashas that you're going through, which are basically periods of your life that are ruled by a particular planet or a point like Rahu Ketu based on your time of birth, right? So every person is going through their independent individual dasha or sub-dashas, right? And like I said, there are also multiple types of dashas, but I'm not going to get into that. Those of you who come from Vedic astrology, and again, those of you who have been watching my videos for a long time, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of you, I do recommend that you also do a little bit of research, and you can also find some videos on my channel where I do briefly mention dashas and antardashas, although I don't think I've ever done a video that where I specifically focused on how to read dashas and antardashas. I don't know, maybe I should look into that. If you're interested, comment in the comment section. But this was the introduction. Another part of the introduction, actually, that I want to mention before I get into it is that you're going to see this on the charts that I have drawn, basically. that I have marked the aspects of the main planets, but I just want to remind you, just in case you have forgotten. Again, those of you who have watched my channel for a long time, you probably know this already, but as a recap, if you're looking at Saturn, according to Vedic astrology, Saturn has so-called special aspects. In fact, multiple planets in Vedic astrology have special aspects or one-sided aspects. So Saturn aspects the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th houses from where it sits. Rahu, Ketu, and Jupiter aspect the 5th, aspect the 7th. Well, the 7th is not relevant because they're always in opposition to one another. So Rahu and Ketu are always opposite. So it's not really relevant to look at the opposition because that's where the other one is placed. But Rahu and Ketu are aspecting the 5th, the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th placements from where they're sitting. Also, of course, I didn't mention this, but of course they're aspecting and they're influencing the houses that they're actually sitting on, not just the aspects. The houses they're sitting on are the most powerfully impacted, but they also cast single-sided aspects. So yes, Rahu and Ketu are always in opposition, so that means if you have Rahu in the 1st house, Ketu will be transiting in the 7th house, right? Because they're always opposite one another. That's why on the charts that you're going to see, I have not even marked Ketu on the horoscope because it's understood that, you know, Ketu is in opposition to Rahu. And I might mention Ketu in the readings a little bit, but mostly I'm going to be focusing on Rahu. Another mention that I think is quite important is the fact that I have written down on the charts that I have drawn, I have written down the time intervals when these transits are going to be active. However, these time intervals, they are general. So bear in mind that the dates of the transits can vary by a few days depending on your location. So in order to know exactly when, let's say, Saturn is going to hit your 11th house, if you have Ascendant in Taurus, you have to actually compute your chart and do a transits calculation based on your actual physical location to know exactly the day and the minute when, you know, it's going to switch from Aquarius to Pisces, just to give you an example. But the dates that I have chosen are, you know, pretty accurate. Give or take, you know, 1 to 3 days, I would say tops, right? This is another mention. So, aside from this, yeah, I'm going to get straight into it. Oh, there's one more thing that I wanted to mention, which is that, again, you may remember this from previous years if you have been watching my channel for a long time, that I like to do my predictions in a random order. So what I do is, right now I actually have Astro Dice. Last time I used to just pick, you know, notes from like a little urn that I created myself. I would, you know, basically do like a raffle thing where I would pick each sign that I was going to do next in the series. But now I use Astro Dice, and I like to mix it up a little bit just because, you know, I don't feel like it's fair that Aquarius and Pisces are always last and Aries is always first, you know? So, I don't know. That's one aspect. And another aspect is, I don't know, it's just more fun this way for me to just do them randomly in a random order. And I pick the next sign, you know, by rolling a dice. So, just wanted to mention that in case maybe some of you are wondering why they're all scrambled. All right, that's pretty much what I wanted to mention, and this is the introductory part. There is going to be the same introduction for each of these videos, so if you listen to it once, yeah, you can, you know, you should just listen to it once. Oh, yeah, there's one more thing. There's one more thing that I want to mention, and again, I have mentioned this in previous years. You can apply these readings for your ascendant sign or your moon sign. And I'm talking about the ascendant sign and moon sign of the D1 chart, the D1 natal chart, not any of the divisional charts. Okay, I cannot vouch for divisional charts. You can also try to look for, I don't know, maybe look into it, tell me if you found some kind of weird coincidences with divisional charts, but I would not look into it because divisional charts are something else, all right, a different type of energy. But with respect to, the moon and the ascendant, you can definitely look at these predictions based on your moon and your ascendant sign, and there will be accuracy connected to it. With the moon sign, it's more to do with your internal landscape and your emotions and what makes you happy on a psychological plane. Let's say, what happens on your inner landscape more, not so much like actual physical things that are happening in your surroundings, right? Whereas the ascendant is a lot more about actual life events. So something to bear in mind. All right, that's pretty much it, and I'm going to get straight into the interpretation right now. Hello and welcome to my astrology channel, Scorpio. So this is the predictions for 2025. Yes, with the required apology, because I know I am extremely late and I don't even know if I'm gonna still do this series for 2026. I'm gonna see. But one thing that I do want to say is that if I will continue the series in 2026, I will start with the last 3 signs who have had like seriously delayed interpretations, right? Delayed predictions videos, so I'm gonna do my best. But aside from that, I know that it has been pretty much like most of the year, right? But there's still almost half of the year left, so I still hope that this reading is going to be useful. And another thing that I want to ask of you is for you to listen to the first parts, because I am going to go through the entire yearly predictions. I think it's only fair because I've done the same predictions for all the other signs. So I would ask you kindly to listen to the predictions for the first part of the year, and also let me know in the comment section to which extent it resonates, which parts resonated, which parts maybe didn't resonate. It would really help. Of course, I do want to issue the regular disclaimer of these predictions are for, pretty general transits. So, of course, a lot will also depend on individual horoscopes and what other transits and dashas are happening for that person at the time as well. Okay. Also, just another short reminder, although I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the general introduction as well. You can use this for the moon as the ascendant as well. So basically you just take your moon. If you have Scorpio moon, you can take the moon sign as a ascendant and just look at the rest of your horoscope from the perspective of the moon sign. So that means that if, let's say, you have Jupiter in Sagittarius, Jupiter would fall in the second house from the moon ascendant, or the moon Lagna, or the Chandra Lagna, as it is called in Vedic astrology. And with the moon chart, the transits will mostly apply to your inner landscape, your emotional needs, your emotional state. With the ascendant, it's most likely about real happenings, real events happening in your surroundings. Okay, that being said, let me get straight into it. So, the chart 1 phase, which is between January 1st to March 26th, is characterized by Saturn in Aquarius, Rahu in Pisces, Ketu in Virgo, because they're always opposite one another, Rahu and Ketu, I mean, and Jupiter in Taurus. And of course, this is also a continuation of all the previous months of 2024. Because the transit has been going on for quite some time. And during this time, the most prominent thing that stands out to me is, of course, the fact that Jupiter is in the 7th house, which is the house of partnerships, especially the romantic partnership, but also business partnership. So clearly this shows that for Scorpio 2025, especially during this time, or the time when Jupiter was transiting through the 7th house, that was a very good time for meeting of a significant romantic partner, especially for women, because Jupiter is the signifier of the husband archetype for women. However, even for men, I mean, Jupiter is still very relevant, especially since it is a great benefic. It is the great benefic, really, the biggest of the benefics, right? So it brings a lot of opportunities, it brings a lot of expansion in any area that it touches. So, yeah, especially since Jupiter is also aspecting the 11th house and the 3rd house, right? Because which are, all of them are social houses, right? So they are the houses of socializing. This is also a time of expanding your social circles, maybe, developing new friendships, also of spending more time with your existing friends as well. Jupiter naturally rules the 5th house, and it also rules the 2nd house in your horoscope. So going through the 7th house, again, especially with Jupiter ruling the 5th house, going through the 7th house, it's a very, very strong time for you to develop some kind of a romance, or at least meet someone during this time when Jupiter is in the 7th house or in Taurus. Someone that might turn out to be a long-term relationship, even a marriage partner at some point down the line. And of course, aside from that, considering the fact that the 2nd house is also the house of business, of savings, it's also the house of family of origin. Because it's conjunct the 5th house going through the 7th house, this can also be a good time for you to spend time with family. Of course, this can also be a time when you're spending time with your spouse or your romantic partner and your family of origin at the same time. And it's mostly going to be a benefic experience, with Jupiter being a very benefic planet. Aside from that, 5th house is also children, it's also self-expression, and you also have Rahu going through the 5th house. So this time is a very good time for creatives, for people who are artists, who are in any kind of a creative field, or people who want to develop a creative hobby or activity. This is a particularly favorable time because Rahu and Jupiter are really encouraging you. They're opening opportunities for you to develop your creativity, your self-expression, especially for people who might be drawn to dramatic arts, right? Expressing yourself creatively in any form. Then the 5th house is also your ideas. So you might find that during the time when Rahu is in Pisces, that your ideas might start to become more unconventional. You might even surprise yourself by the fact that you are, I don't know, changing in some strange way, maybe you are changing or you're questioning, lifelong beliefs, lifelong mentalities. You might want to really think outside of the box, like suddenly you're going to start to really try a new perspective on things. And of course, this can also be a time when you will get flashes of brilliance, right? Because Rahu is very progressive. It's very kind of the mad genius sort of energy. So you might really get some original ideas during this time, and you might want to, make the most of them, basically. Especially when it comes to being self-employed or being creative and, expressing yourself. You might really want to pursue those ideas in question. This can also be a time when you will suddenly develop more of an interest in technology. You're going to suddenly be interested not just in technology, but anything that is state of the art, right? So, I don't know, you might suddenly get into reading about genetics and CRISPR technology, for instance, right? You might also spend more time focusing on education in general and even formal education, because the 5th house is basically the educational level of college degree and up until master's. I would also include master's to some extent. And so this can also be a time when you're going to be really focused on pursuing an education, a formal education, getting a master's degree, getting your bachelor's, maybe enrolling in a degree for the first time or for the second or third time. Rahu is also ruling the 4th house, which makes it even more interesting in some ways. So 4th house is also the house of traditions. It's the house of the mother or the mother side of the family. It's also the house of the homeland, everything that you associate with home, with your origins, your history. So it could also be that your personal history, your, maybe even the relationship with your mother or someone from the mother side of the family, all of those things might somehow play a part in your self-expression, whether it's positive or negative. Also with Rahu, it's more likely to be negative. So it could be, I don't know, your mother is critical of your interests, which would actually stimulate you even more to stubbornly pursue those particular interests. Like, I don't know, you suddenly get an urge to enlist in courses about ancient Egypt or something. It's just giving random examples, right? Your mother would say it's a waste of money, but you're going to really pursue it aggressively just to spite her. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is good or bad. I'm just looking at influences here. At the end of the day, every transit has a purpose. So Rahu going through the 5th house will definitely increase a desire for expansion, for self-expression, for discovering your own uniqueness, for, not being afraid to break out of the mold, break out of tradition, break away from tradition, maybe question things that, especially with the 4th house, because that can show early life teachings that come from the mother or the mother side of the family. So during this time, you might actually question your mother's teachings or go against somehow your mother's desires in some way. On the other hand, on the more positive note, it definitely shows that your happiness is very much going to depend on your ability to express yourself, to pursue creative activities, all of the 5th house stuff, right? To pursue an education, maybe to expand your education, and also can be something connected to children and or speculative gains, right? So the 5th house is also children. So during this time when Rahu is transiting through Pisces, you might have noticed that there was a particularly strong desire for children, all of a sudden, and not just desire for children, but maybe taking a different approach when it comes to your attitudes towards children. Like if you badly wanted children up until the moment of this transit, you may have started to question that, right? Or it could be the other way around. Maybe you never thought about having children, and all of a sudden when Rahu was transiting through Pisces, you suddenly started to think about becoming a parent, right? And this is because Rahu creates a lot of hunger, a lot of desire, especially for materialism in the area that it sits in. So 5th house being the house of children, it could really create a lot of interest in children during this time. Aside from this, because the 5th house is also one of the houses of self-employment, right? Being an individualist, focusing on your own expression, your own path, doing what you love, you might become more of a rebel during this time. You might, suddenly want to do something, I don't know if I want to say revolutionary, but maybe to some extent even revolutionary, when it comes to your life path, right? Especially if in your individual horoscope, there is a connection between the 5th house and the 10th house or the 1st house, especially with maybe also Rahu being involved or the Lord of the 5th house or any planet sitting in the 5th house, right? So since, for instance, the sun is ruling the 10th house for you being a Scorpio Lagna, this could also be that, I don't know, let's say if you have the sun in the 11th house, well, not so much actually if it's in the 11th, because then it would be conjunct Ketu, but let's say the sun is with Rahu in the 5th house, right? So that definitely shows that there's a connection between the 10th and the 5th houses. So if that sounds like you, if that's something you have in your horoscope, this could be a time when you really take some drastic measures. You will have a very strong urge to transform, to really radically alter your career trajectory and go for something that is, what you really want to do with your life as opposed to what other people expect from you. Aside from that, Rahu is aspecting the ninth and the first houses, right? The fire houses. So there's a lot of creative drive during this time. Because Rahu can also be a malefic, there's also a potentially malefic, side to this transit. And with respect to the children area, this can mean that, for instance, if you have children, there might be some disruptions happening in that relationship. You might find your children becoming more rebellious, more difficult to handle, right? There could suddenly start to be a rift happening between you and your children, even worst case scenario, some kind of big, argument, separation. This could range from anything from anything like an argument with your children to them moving out, right? Because you had an argument or something. On the other hand, because Rahu is aspecting the ninth and the first houses, there could also be disagreements with your father figure because of the ninth house influence, especially when it comes to the father's teachings again, right? So there might be a questioning of the father as an authority figure, the father's teachings, right? And the same thing could apply also to mentors, teachers, religious figures that you might be following, priests, so on and so forth. You might be getting into conflicts with them. Usually with Rahu, it's not major conflicts, but there could be some disagreements happening, maybe some misunderstandings. And another thing that could happen, though, is be really careful, especially when Rahu is in the fifth house. Be very, very careful be careful around potential salespeople, potential scammers. So you might be more vulnerable to people trying to scam you out of money, especially people who are trying to attract your investments, right? So if you run into someone who is telling you, hey, I want you to invest this much money into this great business idea that I have, or take your money and place it into this particular stock, right? You have to be careful because you might attract people who are deceptive during this time, whether they are badly intended or just purely, not well informed. It's advisable when you have malefics transiting through the fifth house to not really get too much into investing or anything too speculative. Don't risk your money, especially not your hard-earned savings during this time. Aside from that, because Rahu is also casting an aspect on the first house, you might find that during this time you're going to become way more focused on your physical appearance. And you might also become a little bit more self-conscious because Saturn is also looking at the 10th house. So you might suddenly want to put more effort into being more presentable and care a lot about your image. With Rahu again, you might also have a desire to really express yourself in a way that is authentic and individualistic in some way. So you might take some, let's say, for lack of a better word, radical decisions when it comes to the way that you present yourself to the world, right? So you might really change your fashion sense or your look in some way. I don't know, get a very unusual haircut or dye your hair a strange color. You might find more urges like this happening when Rahu is transiting through the fifth house. Again, this is especially true if you have a contact between the first house and the fifth house in your horoscope, and or if you have Venus in the fifth house, or to some extent also in the ninth or the first houses in your horoscope. Aside from this, because Jupiter is also aspecting, so I should have said this as well, Jupiter is also aspecting the 3rd and the 11th houses, aside from the fact that this can increase chances of you meeting new people, expanding your social circle, and also having a good time with your normal, regular acquaintances and family. This can also be a good time in the relationship with your siblings, whether it's older siblings or younger siblings. You might also have good relationships with your neighbors. So, for instance, if you've been in a situation where you've had conflict with a neighbor, you might find that it really tones down during this transit when Jupiter is in Taurus. Now, because Saturn is going through the fourth house, this is definitely the potentially more challenging transit. So the fourth house and Saturn are pretty dichotomous, oppositional energies, because Saturn normally rules Capricorn, which is the sign that governs the 10th house, right? So it's the opposite energy of the moon, which is the planet that governs Cancer, which normally is associated to the fourth house. So because of this oppositional energy here, this like push and pull, I don't want to say like enemy configuration, but it kind of is a little bit of an enemy configuration, right? So in other words, Saturn is just not very comfortable in the fourth house. And with Saturn transiting the fourth house, it's a similar energy to Saturn transiting, aspecting the moon, in the sense that it can bring a tendency towards darkness emotionally, right? Darkness, heaviness, restriction as well. So this could be a time when you feel that it's harder for you to really be in touch with your feelings for whatever reason, right? You might tend to bottle things up instead of really opening up emotionally. So this can really bring risks of, depending of course on the intensity and what else is going on in the horoscope, this could lead to even things like psychosomatic illnesses, particularly connected to the fourth house, which means the stomach, the chest. So that could even be the heart, the cardiovascular system, the breasts even, right? So it normally with Saturn, Saturn can also rule disease because it rules, every kind of obstacle, frustration that you can think about, that's Saturn, right? So when it's sitting in the fourth house, if you have had any kind of underlying issues connected to the chest area of your body that you have neglected, this could be a time when they're going to flare up, right? When, they're going to become insufferable and Saturn is going to somehow force you to do something about it, right? So, I don't know, if you've had some lung problems, heaven forbid, they may really start to flare up during this time, during this transit when Saturn is in Aquarius, which is going to force you to see a doctor, right? Because of the discomfort. And it's also a good idea whenever you have a Saturn transit to take preventive action, right? If you already know that you have this transit, it's a good idea to make sure that you check everything to do with the fourth house related body parts, right? The breasts, the chest, anything that has to do with the chest area inside the body and skin level, surface level, and the stomach especially, right? So if you, again, any kind of vulnerabilities, any kind of issues that you may have with these body parts are not to be neglected. So you have to look into them and see a doctor. Aside from that, the fourth house also is the home base. So it rules real estate, your actual home physically, which also shows that if you are neglecting any kind of issues, like, I don't know, or you have neglected any kind of issues, that's another part, right? So I don't know, there was a pipe clogged and maybe you patched it up, or there was some problem and maybe there was a leak, and you patched it up, in an improvised manner without calling a plumber. This could be the time when it bursts, right? Anything that you have neglected and swept under the rug might really resurface during this time connected to real estate. Could also be the same with vehicles, because fourth house is also connected to vehicles. So same thing with cars, bicycles, yachts, anything, right? Anything that is a vehicle, right? This is a time to not neglect any kind of problem because it could lead to bigger problems later down the line. Aside from this, Saturn is aspecting the 6th house by 3rd aspect. It's aspecting the 10th house by 7th aspect. It's also aspecting the 4th house, right, by the 1st house by 10th aspect. So the 3rd aspect to the 6th house, fortunately, shows that you're going to make conscious effort towards your health during this time, because the sixth house rules your health. It also rules employment, right? So it actually rules your daily routines, but specifically refers to people who are employed as opposed to self-employed, right? Meaning people who are employees, who are in a position of service, if you will. So Saturn looking at the sixth house shows that there will be conscious effort put into the sixth house areas, right? So you will have this strong effort to put, whether it's because you consciously notice that this area needs a lot of work, or it's because, Saturn might give you a little nudge through creating all kinds of frustrations and obstacles connected to these areas of life to push you to work in this direction. So one way or another, you're going to find yourself working harder when it comes to everyday routines, right? So this could also mean that if you are employed, it might be an increase of workload at work, right? This could mean that if you are looking for a job, it's going to be pretty frustrating. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? So Saturn might make you apply for 100 jobs to get, 1 or 2 interviews, for instance. And Saturn also wants you to be thorough, right? Doesn't like any kind of mistakes. So wants you to be 100% prepared, to plan everything in advance. Do not leave anything to chance. Don't be sloppy in any way. And that's how you will get the best results with this transit. So basically, Saturn is going to back off as long as it feels that you are doing everything in your power and you're really putting in consistent effort. Also, especially since Saturn is aspecting the 10th house as well, you're definitely going to have to put more effort into your career. But the good news is, with Saturn's aspect on the career houses, the 6th and the 10th house, it shows that basically the results that you're going to get are going to be in direct proportion to how much effort you're willing to put in. So the harder you work towards your career goals, the better the results that you're going to get are going to be. Like I said, with Saturn aspecting the first house, this also shows that you're going to be focused on taking care of your physical body. And I think, considering the rest of the transits, most likely it's because Saturn is going to really push you to focus on your health during this time. But it could also just be that you become more responsible, you start to put things into perspective, and you decide to become more preventative in your attitude. So you just want to make sure that you avoid health problems later down the line. Yeah, this is pretty much what I can see actually for the chart 1 phase. So I'm going to move into the chart 2 phase right now. So the chart 2 phase is from March 26th to June 8th, 2025. This is characterized by Saturn being in Pisces, Rahu being in Pisces as well. Also Ketu being in Virgo, right? So basically, Saturn is moving into Pisces and it is conjunct Rahu in your 5th house. And during this time, Jupiter is going to start out being in Taurus until May 13th, after which it's going to move into Gemini from May 13th to June 8th, right? So that's why I haven't drawn Jupiter on the chart, because it switches signs. So I just stuck to Saturn and Rahu being drawn on the chart. But of course, you have to take into account the Jupiter placements as well. So Rahu and Saturn are moving in the 5th house. So this is big, right? So you have 2 malefics in the 5th house. And like I said before, so all of the things that I have said before are still standing. So with respect to the 5th house areas, with respect to having an increased desire maybe for children, an increased interest in focusing on education. However, because Saturn is moving in with Rahu right now, it's also bringing all of that frustration associated with Saturn connected to that 5th house area. So what this could mean is that, for instance, when it comes to your education, so let's say you have started a study program when Rahu was in Pisces because you suddenly developed an interest for a particular area, or you suddenly decided you need a degree. now Saturn is moving in, and you're going to find all kinds of obstacles and frustrations in your path when it comes to getting that degree. Maybe you'll find the subject is more difficult to focus on than you had originally anticipated. There could also be all kinds of like everyday petty sort of obstacles. Like, I don't know, maybe the professor you had past semester has quit, and now you have to deal with a nastier professor, for instance. Or, I don't know, the tuition increases, heaven forbid, right? And you find yourself struggling having to pay the tuition. Or maybe it's not the tuition that increases, but maybe your income decreases, right? If you're an adult and you start a college degree based on your own savings by some miracle, or based on you working part-time during, out of university hours, you may have calculated a certain budget, but I don't know, now something is happening at work because due to downsizing, heaven forbid, or whatever, you might find yourself in a more frustrating situation of struggling to, make ends meet. So Saturn can bring all kinds of frustrations, all kinds of obstacles. And of course, this can also apply to speculative gains, especially if you have made any kind of risky investments when Rahu was sitting in the fifth house alone. Saturn moving into that will really kind of, slap you over the wrist, basically, for any potential mistakes that you have made. This might be a time when, you're going to have to pay some kind of due when it comes to the fifth house. Saturn is also called the Lord of Karma, and it's not for nothing, right? A lot of the times when Saturn moves into a house, it's basically showing us everything that is not working with that area of our lives, right? That's really the purpose of Saturn. That's the most positive way of looking at these transits, because even though it might bring a lot of frustrations, a lot of obstacles, that you haven't foreseen, the positive side is that if you really take the challenge and you really rise up to the occasion, you will get much better results, and also you will become better as a person. So Saturn is like a hard taskmaster that wants you to progress in that area of life, wants you to rethink things, right? So, also, of course, last but not least, let's not forget that the fifth house is about romantic affairs. It's about affairs of the heart. It's also about passions, hobbies, self-expression. So, the fifth house being connected to affairs, especially with Jupiter having been in Taurus and still continuing in Taurus until May 13th in your seventh house, right? This could bring some kind of awakening with respect to a romantic relationship that you have been in. Like, it makes you really question things. Like, are you in the right relationship with the right person? If there's anything in that connection that was just not solid, not honest, basically anything that was built on a rocky foundation or a bad foundation is likely to collapse during a Saturn transit, right? Because Saturn does not want anything that is superficial, that is shallow, that will not stand the test of time, right? Saturn wants everything to be by the book and has to have everything being done thoroughly. Now, Saturn aspecting the seventh house by third aspect shows that during this segment, you're actually going to be forced to prioritize relationships, right? Particularly partnerships. And of course, this could be your romantic partner. It could be a business partner as well, if you're in a business-based relationship, business-based partnership, sorry. Or a partnership-based business, same thing, almost same thing. The bottom line is, right, one way or another, Saturn is going to force you to focus on the seventh house and seventh house affairs. Seventh house can also be sexuality. Normally in Vedic astrology, because it's connected to marriage, seventh house is actually the house of sexuality, even more so than the eighth house. So during this time, you could be going through some kind of a dry spell, sexually, or if there are any kind of, again, things that you have neglected, like underlying traumas or health problems that could be getting in the way of you having a healthy sex life, you might find yourself really dealing with these problems during this time. You know, like they're really surfacing all of a sudden, and you're forced to kind of look at them. Aside from that, Saturn is also looking at the 11th house, so it's bringing restriction into that area of relationships, because the 11th house is about friendship circles, it's about acquaintances, it's about social gatherings in general. So 11th house is like concerts and going to social gatherings, etc., etc. So you might find yourself more isolated during this time, either because you will have a kind of a desire to isolate, or because again, it could be due to circumstances. Maybe friends are going to fall by the bandwagon, right? They're dropping out of your life for one reason or another. All kinds of reasons, especially since, let's not forget, Ketu is also in the 11th house because it's opposite Rahu, right? So the whole time when Rahu is in Pisces, Ketu is in Virgo. So Ketu also stands for loss. And sitting in the 11th house, that could be loss of friends or loss of friendships, right? Your friends could disappear on you during this time. Worst case scenario, this can even be friends passing away, you know. Same thing for elder siblings, really. In your case, Ketu is co-ruling your ascendant, and it's, you know, going into the 11th house. But Ketu is a malefic, right? So the way that I would read this would be that most likely it's also coming from your end, that you're kind of losing interest in maintaining certain friendships or going to, you know, large-scale social events or crowded areas in general, because that's basically what the 11th house stands for, right? You might find yourself just wanting to restrict your social circle, restrict your interactions, and and I think also because Ketu is very spiritual, this could also just be that you start to become more uncompromising, especially with Ketu co-ruling your ascendant. You might be like, you know, I want people that are going to serve my life trajectory, that are going to be, you know, ride or die sort of friends. They're going to be by my side when the going gets tough, and I'm not interested in maintaining shallow connections. Whether this is coming from your side or whether this is coming from Saturn, basically, you know, purging your horoscope of people that are just not, they're not good for you, right? One way or another, you might really see your social circle restricting during this time. And by this time, I'm talking about the time when Ketu is transiting your 11th house in general, even more so for the time when Saturn is also transiting the 5th house. Aside from that, Saturn is also aspecting your 2nd house. Now, the good news about this, of course, you also have to envision that Jupiter is in the 7th house until May 13th, and it's aspecting the 11th, it's aspecting the 3rd, and then it's moving into Gemini from May 13th, right? So it's sitting in the 8th house, it's aspecting the 12th, and it's aspecting the 4th houses, right? So on the positive side, especially from May 13th onwards, you might really see an improvement of your mental health, like your overall, you know, feeling of satisfaction, your feeling of happiness, your well-being emotionally might significantly increase during this time. And, you know, this also shows that the restrictions are lifted when it comes to your career, right? Because Saturn is no longer sitting on, no longer looking at the 10th house, and it's no longer aspecting the 6th. Which shows that, you know, it might be easier to get results from your career during this time. So if you've had a hard time finding a job up until this point, you might find it easier to get a job after May 13th. And or you might find it easier to make more money to support yourself. However, because Saturn is also looking at the 2nd house, this could mean that you still have to really watch your expenses. So you need to be careful not to overspend, not to, don't just spend lavishly, throw money on things that you don't need. Because when Saturn's looking at the 2nd house, again, that Lord of Karma is kind of staring at you and wants to make sure that you are not being wasteful, that you are being mindful, that you're budgeting, that you're responsible when it comes to your finances and your saving. So you might also see the most blunt explanation of this would be that you will see that it's harder for you to make, to save money during this time, right? So to save for a rainy day. It might be harder for whatever reason, either because your income is shrinking or because your expenses have to go up, right? So it's a good idea to be mindful, to not overspend, like I said, and to budget. And of course, the second house is not just about your finances. It's also about family of origin, and it's also about your diet to some extent. So Saturn looking at the second house can show a decrease of your appetite, or you just going through a cleansing of your diet, right? Again, whether it's a conscious thing or whether it's your being pressured by circumstances. If, heaven forbid, you're found with, some kind of a medical problem, this could mean that you are forced to go on a particular diet because of your health problems. Either way, you might just find that your food intake is being restricted during this time. Aside from this, the relationship to the family of origin could get colder a little bit. So you could lose touch of people from the family of origin, whether it's your parents or siblings or anyone in the family of origin. Relationships could just get colder, could get more business-like, not necessarily that you won't care about your family or they won't care about you altogether, but it's going to become, you're going to sense a more formal energy there. You're going to sense a more kind of distant energy emotionally with the family of origin. And when Jupiter's moving into Gemini, right, on May 13th and sitting in the 8th house, this is going to be very good for you when it comes to potentially getting a loan. So if you have been interested in getting a loan for whatever reason, especially if it is for education, because in your case, Jupiter is ruling the 5th house, this is a very favorable time. So if you, let's say, have tried to get a loan to pursue your education, to get a degree in the past and you were rejected, I would definitely recommend that you try again after May 13th because you might get a better result. So because of that, right, Jupiter is sitting in the 8th house, and which is the house of loans, and it's the house of using other people's finances, basically. So the great benefic is going to potentially bring new opportunities in these areas. And of course, needless to say, this can be a very good time for anyone who is thinking about getting a career in anything connected to the 8th house, right? So managing other people's finances, like a bank manager, an accountant to some extent, or someone who handles loans, mostly, not so much an accountant. Someone who deals with insurance, another thing. Any kind of also secret activities, right? So 8th house is also about looking into things in depth. It's about research. It's about psychology. So if you are active in any kind of profession connected to the 8th house, this time after May 13th is going to be particularly favorable. So not just necessarily all times after May 13th, but particularly during the time when Jupiter is in Gemini. And aside from that, Jupiter is aspecting your 4th house. So that's definitely, like I said originally, it's a very good sign that your mental health is going to improve. Your mood is probably going to improve. I would say this is especially true if you are looking at this from the perspective of the Chandra Lagna, being Scorpio, but it's also true for Ascendant, regular Ascendant in Scorpio as well. When Jupiter is looking at the 12th house as well, because it's going to be aspecting the 12th house by 5th aspect, because it's going to be sitting in the 8th house. During this time, it also shows that anything to do with import-export is going to be favorable. It's going to work out in your favor. So if you're wanting to start a business about import-export, or you just want to buy something from abroad, this is definitely the best time to do so. Or if you want to ship something abroad, definitely the best time to do so. Of course, this can also show that it's a very good time for you to travel to faraway places, especially, like I said, when Jupiter is moving into Gemini from May 13th. This is going to be very favorable for you to travel to places where a foreign language is being spoken. And speaking of foreign languages, the 8th house is also connected to foreign languages in particular, which means that if you're trying to learn a foreign language, or maybe you're activating as a foreign language teacher, this is going to be a very favorable time for you as well. Meaning the time when Jupiter is in Gemini by transit. Another thing is that mental health wise, you can really derive a lot of positivity from getting in touch with your faith, right? So going to church, going to temple or any kind of place of worship, going to an ashram, like spending some time in a place of, I guess for lack of a better word, pilgrimage even, right? Taking a trip particularly with the purpose of seeing a religious site can be very favorable for you during this time when Jupiter is in Gemini. And aside from that, practicing, even if you're not at all religiously inclined, practicing meditation is definitely something that's going to be very favorable, going to really improve your mental health. And last but not least, when Jupiter is aspecting the 12th house, this can actually show that losses will turn in your favor. So one thing that I've seen actually, both from the natal chart and also from the Chandra Lagna perspective, is that when benefics are transiting, aspecting the 12th house, and for instance, a person loses their job, they tend to get a very good compensation package, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say losses could end up becoming kind of like a blessing in disguise, right? Financially, especially. So if you're actually going through losses, so I don't know, you have gone through something ongoing, maybe you have had a trial that has been dragging on for over a year, just to give you an example. Hopefully nobody has to go through that, but just to give an example, when this transit hits, right, you're going to see that losses will significantly diminish, right? Expenses will significantly diminish. Those are some of the things that Jupiter can do when it's aspecting the 12th house. Okay, and Rahu is also still going to look at the 1st house and the 9th houses. So everything that I said in the chart 1 phase about Rahu sitting in the 5th house is still standing. And one more thing that I would like to add is because you only have Rahu looking at the Ascendant in this phase, you're going to feel more unconventional when it comes to your sense of style, your look, your overall sense of self-expression, because the restrictions of Saturn are moving away. And also, I think with respect to your health and your physical well-being, it's going to be a better phase than the previous phase. And okay, moving on to the chart 3 and final phase of 2025, which is basically currently happening at the moment that I record this. So this is from June 8th until the end of the year, December 31st. And of course, it's going to continue a little bit onwards into 2026. So this is a time when Saturn is in Pisces, Rahu is in Aquarius, and Jupiter starts out being in Gemini from June 8th until October 13th, after which it will move into Cancer from October 13th until December 31st. So basically, Saturn and Rahu are switching places right now compared to the first chart phase, right? So Saturn is going to be in Pisces in your 5th house. Rahu is going to be in Aquarius in your 4th house. So there are some interesting changes happening during this time. Rahu sitting in the 4th house is pretty much showing a disruptive phase. So whenever Rahu is touching either the second, whenever it's transiting either in the 2nd or the 4th houses, what I've seen a lot is that people tend to distance themselves from the family of origin. Again, the reason why they distance themselves is under question, and a lot has to be seen through the lens of the individual horoscope and what other configurations are happening. Usually with Rahu, again, because it's a malefic, it's usually not the happiest scenario, right? So either it's some kind of a conflict happening between you and the family of origin. Could be specifically your mother or someone from your mother's side of the family, because that's mostly what the 4th house connects to. And aside from that, right, so there could be some kind of a disconnect, and or at the same time, there is an increase of wanderlust, right? Because Rahu is about foreign cultures, foreign influences, etc., etc., everything that is new and fascinating and exotic. So when it's transiting through the fourth house, you're suddenly going to have this itch of wanting to see foreign places, faraway lands. You might, at the very least, you might feel this real dissatisfaction when it comes to your area, your home, right? Your physical home. So you're going to get the urge to either move, maybe just switching apartments or switching houses, right? Or it could be you want to move into a different neighborhood, right? It could just be at the very least, right? Let's say you are going through this transit, you're very frustrated, and you cannot afford to change to a different property or to a different neighborhood. What you could do to appease Rahu is to bring Rahuvian influences into the home, right? So this means burning incense, for instance, because Rahu rules smoke. It also rules spirits, alcohol, not encouraging anyone to become an alcoholic. But, with Rahu, it generally will keep it happy if you start to bring some alcohol, maybe keep a bottle of whiskey somewhere in the home, or, drink a little bit, just a mouthful every now and then. If obviously if you have a history of alcoholism, I'm not trying to tell you should break the 10-year fast for the sake of this transit. You can just rely on smoke in exchange. And again, I'm not encouraging picking up smoking either, but burning some incense, even burning some sage, every now and then, that keeps Rahu happy, right? It will kind of give you this sense of peace. It will kind of like appease this wanderlust and this general sense of dissatisfaction with your living environment. And of course, also bringing any kind of exotic foreign influence into the home, right? Like, I don't know, you're suddenly passionate about ancient Egypt. It will help if you bring in something of ancient Egyptian aesthetic into the home, like a statue of Anubis or something. Just to give you an example, right? Aside from that, Rahu can also show, again, everything that is unusual. So there might be something unusual happening with the relationship with the mother figure in your life, or the relationship to someone from your mother's side of the family, right? Some kind of relatives from that side of the family. There might be some kind of sudden changes there in the relationships, in the tone of the relationship. Aside from that, again, Rahu also, not Rahu, but the fourth house also rules vehicles, right? Any form of transportation that you use. So again, you might have the same sense of dissatisfaction when it comes to your modes of transportation. Like suddenly you may have just gotten a new car 2 years ago, but you're suddenly going to get an itch to get a new car, right? Especially since Rahu again rules state-of-the-art technology as well. So you might, again, really have this burning desire to buy new gadgets, new phones, new whatever, anything that's state of the art, right? So, again, a new way, a good way to appease Rahu and all these tendencies. Again, I would go back to the smoke and the alcohol because I think those are the cheapest options. But of course, you can also look into, improving your home through more electronic gadgets, maybe through more AI, but just bear in mind the fact that Rahu tends to create these kinds of unusual obsessions that are going to be gone by the time the transit is over for the most part, unless there's significant influence of Rahu also in your natal chart, such as, having planets natally conjunct Rahu, in which case you probably have this tendency. But it would have to be somehow connected to this transit as well, right? I don't know, like if you natally have Rahu in the fourth house conjunct Venus, for instance, then it's probably not just a passing phase. But otherwise, for most people, it's probably going to be just you're suddenly going to get these obsessions, these interests that you want to pursue, and just be careful not to waste too much money on them. Now, on the positive side, because the fourth house lord, which is Rahu, is going into the fourth house, right? This is also showing kind of stability of the home. It's showing, again, if you have been worried about losing your lease, heaven forbid, or whatever, some kind of home instability, this is stabilizing that. Ironically, even though Rahu is normally a disruptive energy, in this case, because the Lord of the Fourth is getting into the fourth, it's actually stabilizing the home environment. And And also the vehicles, like I said, right? So it's less likely also for things to break down during this time, especially since Saturn has moved away from the fourth house. And aside from this, right, Ketu is going to be moving into the 10th house because Ketu is going to be opposite Rahu. So this also brings some interesting changes because Ketu tends to lose interest in any area that it touches. It pushes a person to lose interest. So in your case, heading into the 10th house, this can show that suddenly it will be difficult for you to focus on your job, difficult for you to focus on the chosen career path. There might be very real dissatisfactions. Now, whether they are something to be taken seriously or not is to be seen from the rest of the horoscope and more specialized, I would say, personalized transits. However, what I can tell you is that whenever Ketu is in a house, the way to offset the negative impact of Ketu, especially when it comes to career, is you need to find some spiritual meaning. So no matter what you are doing, you need to cling to the spiritual meaning of your work and focus on that, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're working in a casino, which is probably the least spiritual or one of the most unspiritual environments that you can imagine, right? Instead of focusing on, I don't know, I'm here to get people's money, focus on, I'm here to entertain people. I'm here to make people forget about their worries, right? To give them a good time. For instance, if you're, I don't know, working in random positions at a casino, right? Any kind of profession, no matter what line you're in, there has to be something spiritual that you can cling to and focus on. And that will keep you motivated. That will help you get through this transit so that you don't get fired, right? And of course, if you have the opportunity to change your profession into something or change your job into something that is actually aligned with your spiritual values, that's even better. That will definitely keep Ketu happy. Aside from this, though, another way to appease Ketu rules dogs and fish. So if you're having career problems when this transit hits, which is a possibility, especially if there's other afflictions in the horoscope that will point towards career problems, one thing to take into account is be nice to dogs and fish. Take care of fish, take care of dogs. Now, again, if you absolutely hate animals, I'm not trying to tell you that you need to get an animal and just neglect it, right? But the better care you take of fish, of dogs, right? If you don't have dogs, you don't care about them, look into organizations that take care of stray animals and donate some money to them. Be nice to dogs whenever you're in a situation where you actually directly have to deal with dogs, right? That is going to keep Ketu happy. I know this is very woo-woo, but it's deeply rooted into, Vedic astrology, mythology, and all that. And I have seen it, all right? Based on practice, I've seen these things happen where people are, because of Ketu, a person, for instance, who has a affliction from Ketu, let's say to the sun, because they're keeping a dog and they're, really taking care of that dog and they're respecting the dog's desires and nature and all that, feeding them properly, taking them out for walks and all that, they're doing well in recognition, in career and stamina and health and all that. Because Ketu will back off, as long as it feels that you are taking care of the things that it governs. Aside from that, moving on from Ketu, right? Of course, I think in your case, it's going to be particularly impactful because, again, naturally, Ketu is co-ruling your Lagna, right? It's your Ascendant. So, transiting through the 10th house, this is like, it's a double whammy. It's a two-edged sword in a way, because on the one hand, you're gonna really be disinterested, like you're gonna have this wave of disinterest and dissatisfaction in whatever your profession is, your current profession is. But at the same time, you're also gonna have a strong drive to have a career, right? To focus on a career. So it's really gonna bring that focus and make you go soul searching with respect to what is the right trajectory for you. And it's not to be ignored, right? It's something to be taken seriously and followed through and through so you can end up progressing by the end of this transit. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck. So, aside from this, all right, Saturn. So let's move back to Saturn. Saturn is going through your fifth house. So everything that I have said with respect to Saturn's potentially negative impact in the chart 2 phase is going to continue. In the sense that Saturn transiting the fifth house will show a kind of coldness happening in fifth house areas, which include romance, include children, relationship to children, self-expression, speculative gains. This is definitely not the time to be reckless with investments. Like I've said before in the chart 2 phase and in the chart 1 phase, I'm not trying to say don't invest, right, during this time. Don't, and by the way, investments are not just stock market stuff, right? They're also pension funds and all kind. Anything that you see as an investment in your future is an investment. It's a speculative sort of investment. So during this time, it's not like you can't invest, right? It's not a high potential of deception, unlike what happened when Rahu was in the fifth house. But it's a time to be very thorough. Again, Saturn doesn't like sloppiness, does not like second guessing or guessing at all, right? So Saturn is going to want you to be very thorough. So like if you're looking for, I don't know, something to invest your pension or creating a pension fund for yourself, for instance, you have to be extremely thorough with doing your research and, you know, research the crap out of that company that you are thinking about, right? Giving your money to. Because otherwise, if you're sloppy, if you're just choosing something because someone recommended this and you don't look into it, you have high chances of this turning out to be a bad move and you losing money at some point in the future, right? Aside from that, obviously probably the most frustrating thing when Saturn is going through the fifth house is this feeling of romance drying up, right? So irrespective of whether you're in a relationship or not, you might just go through a phase where you're going to see, and I think really with Saturn transiting the fifth, there can also be a feeling of loneliness. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? So you might go through a phase where you might be questioning your attractiveness, right? Or you might be frustrated with the fact that things are not happening romance-wise. Maybe even if you are in a relationship, you might find that the romance is fizzling out or your partner is not affectionate enough, right? And this is not necessarily a bad thing, all right? It's up to you to kind of weather this storm. And of course, you have to also practice your own judgment. So I'm not trying to say that, I don't know what the full circumstances are. So if you're in a relationship with a partner who has neglected you for the past 5 years, that's probably not to do with this transit, right? But what happens when this transit hits is the fact that Saturn is actually going to give you the courage to abandon a situation that is not working for you. And in fact, usually with Saturn, it's kind of like tough love, you know? So it's more like ready or not, here I come. Which means that if you are in a bad relationship and you're not willing to end it, Saturn is going to arrange things in such a way as for the relationship to end, right? If you're in a situationship, even more so, because Saturn does not like situationships, let me tell you that. Saturn does not like anything that is shallow, that is uncertain, that is not built to last, right? So anything that is superficial is going to be under fire during this time. If you have children, right, this can show a kind of a colder relationship with the child. You might feel almost like the relationship is becoming a little bit formal almost. You might feel like the child is kind of, you know, not as emotional, not as affectionate, maybe. Aside from this, what could happen is that you are feeling more frustrated when it comes to self-expression. So you might find it harder to express yourself. You might find yourself inhibiting yourself a lot more because you're afraid of judgment. You're afraid of being criticized. So Saturn really going through the fifth house, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, might really trigger a lot of childhood traumas, especially traumas connected to not feeling accepted for who you are, not feeling belonging, right, to a group, and not feeling included for who you really are. as opposed to pretending to be something you're not in order to get appreciation and inclusion. So it's going to trigger a lot of these things, right? If you have any ongoing issues or any, buried issues connected to these parts of the psyche or these particular types of memories, they're really going to surface during this time, and it's probably not going to be a comfortable experience. However, because Saturn is the way it is, right, this is an invitation for you to look deeper into things, maybe go through therapy, try to work things out, right? Again, everything that I've said with respect to education is also going to stand, especially since Saturn is now alone in the 5th house. There could definitely be frustrations happening in the area of education. So, I don't know, things that just resurface that make it harder for you to focus on your studies, or maybe harder for you to pay for your studies, right? There could be all kinds of like real life obstacles like getting in your way when it comes to you getting an education. Same thing for pursuing hobbies or any form of self-expression. On a positive note, though, if you have at all considered branching out on your own, becoming self-employed, this is definitely a great time for you to focus on these things, because Saturn is ruling the 3rd house, also ruling the 4th house, and it's falling into your 5th house during this time. So if you have configurations in your horoscope that actually suggest you would do well as a self-employed individual, as someone who's even a business owner, this is definitely going to be the best time for you to focus on doing this, right? Because of that 3rd house influence, which is about independence, it's about courage, it's about going for what you want and stubbornly pursuing your self-expression. And in fact, if anything, Saturn is really going to challenge your commitment to yourself, right? Saturn is like, so let me just give you an example. Let's say you have committed to finally choosing a career trajectory that is actually in line with your true self, right? With your values, with what you love to do for a living. When you are going through this transit, you might find a lot of obstacles in your path. So like, let's say you have decided to quit your job a few months ago and focus on your side hustle, and all of a sudden, I don't know, it's like your side hustle is doing worse than ever, or something happens, something unexpected, I don't know, your laptop breaks down or whatever, and you have unexpected expenses, right? So Saturn can throw all kinds of difficult situations in your path, but that's because it wants you to prove yourself, to prove your loyalty, to your commitment to your path. And Saturn always rewards people who weather the storm, right? Saturn rewards the people who rise up to the challenge that it throws in their face a lot of the times. Aside from that, so everything that I said about, I think I've mentioned this in the previous phase as well, right? So Saturn going into, aspecting the 2nd house definitely shows that you have to watch your finances still. So you have to be careful, have a budget, don't overspend, and be prepared for the fact that when Saturn's going through the 5th house, you're probably going to have a hard time saving money. It's going to be harder than in the previous phase. Now, aside from this, when Jupiter is in Gemini, everything that I have already discussed in the chart 2 phase is going to stand for this phase as well. However, the part that I didn't cover is for when Jupiter goes into Cancer from October 13th onwards, right? So when Jupiter is going to move into Cancer, it's moving into your 9th house, which is actually an extremely positive transit. Normally, Jupiter in Cancer is going to be positive for everyone because Jupiter is going to be exalted in Cancer. However, for you, falling in the 9th house, which is the house of blessings and opportunities and all things sugar, spice, and everything nice, it's going to be an extremely positive transit, right? So you can expect all kinds of opportunities to come into your life, things that maybe you have been waiting for a long time. This is also especially true for people who are looking to find a long-term relationship, especially for women, because Jupiter is the husband archetype in a woman's horoscope. This can definitely be a good time for you to meet a suitable partner, right? even if you don't look at it from the relationship perspective, Jupiter transiting through the ninth is going to bring a lot of opportunities in your life. You can expect to see an increase of your financial situation. You can expect to see an increase of your overall well-being, your sense of purpose, your sense of optimism and faith in life. The relationship to your father figure is going to be really positive during this time. Relationship to gurus, relationship to teachers is also going to be really positive. For those of you who have maybe looked for, a guru, a guide, a teacher, maybe even looking for, what are they called? Personal coach, I think, nowadays, or even something like a physical trainer, right? This is going to be the best time for you to find a suitable person who's really going to help you grow when Jupiter is moving into Cancer and sitting in your ninth house. And of course, the ninth house is also about expansion in general. It's about travel. So this is going to be a very good time for you to travel abroad, especially because ninth house is pretty far away lands. It's also a really good time to focus on anything to do with academia, especially for those of you who want to go into really high level education, PhD or specialized courses, maybe research. This is definitely going to be a very favorable time. For those of you who are thinking about maybe pursuing a spiritual path, like, I don't know, getting into the priesthood, I know it's more specific, or, something to do with priesthood, right? Or any organized religion. When Jupiter is going through the ninth house, it's a very good time. First of all, it's a very good time for anyone to focus on faith, right? And issues connected to faith, like finding their faith, rekindling their faith, focusing more on religion, on meditation, spending time in, honoring the divine and all that in any form that you can think about. Aside from that, Jupiter is also going to be looking at the first house, and it's also going to be looking at the fifth house. So it's going to appease Saturn a little bit, right, when Jupiter enters Cancer from October 13th. So all of the potentially negative impacts that Saturn in the fifth house will bring into your life are going to be toned down significantly once Jupiter is looking at Saturn starting October 13th. And let me think, what else? Oh, also another thing that I wanted to mention, when Jupiter is going through the ninth house, anything to do with publishing a book, writing a book, all of those things are very favored. Getting into higher education, not just higher education on a formal level, but for you to expand your education, your mind, right? So getting into reading philosophy or world religions or anything like that, right? Exploring other cultures is going to be very favored during this time when Jupiter is falling into Cancer. And yeah, this is pretty much everything that I can say really about your horoscope, Scorpio. So I really hope that you will enjoy this video. And again, I really, really am sorry about this delay that has happened. I know it's like very late in the year, but looking at the silver lining, you still have almost half of the year to get the most of these predictions. So I really hope that you take them into account, and also keep me posted as the year progresses with respect to what resonates, what didn't resonate. And feel free to come back to this video and comment in the comment section. It would help a lot, not just for me, but for other people who are going through the same things. Aside from this, though, I will remind you once again to please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. It's the easiest way to support me, and it is free. Also consider clicking on the notifications bell if you want to be notified every time I post a new video. And if you're interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. You can check out the link in the video description. Actually, my email address in the video description. So you can email me for a pricing list or any other details that you're interested in with respect to personal consultations. Aside from that, I also have a tarot channel, which I will be linking in the video description as well. So if you're interested in tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And last but not least, I also have a membership section. I still have to post. I have yet to post a new video in that section as well. I know I have delayed, but there's still already plenty of content in there that is members only. And you can see the videos that I have posted for each membership tier again in the video description. I have links to my playlist so you can see the topics that were posted. So yeah, if you also want to find out more about the membership section, you can check out the introductory part of this video, or just click on the join button. It will show you the membership tiers with the respective prices in your local currency. So yes, if you would be interested in that, of course, I would love to have you there as a member. And aside from all this, again, thank you very much for listening to this video. Like I said, I really hope that you have a great rest of 2025 and you really make the most of this information. And I hope to see you at my next astrology video. All right? Have a nice rest of the year.